Today's khutbah was basically about the sources that we rely upon to extract the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. In the last khutbah we started talking about the biography of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And I thought that before we go into the actual events, we should know where do we get this information from. We should know that. Because once we know where we get this information from, these are the same sources where we get every information from with regards to our religion. So in the previous khutbah we talked about the Quran, the main source of the religion. And we didn't have to talk too much about the Quran because everybody knows that the Quran is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or at least it is the word that, the preserved word that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam attributed to Allah. So even the non-Muslims, scholars, the Orientalists who have studied Muslim history and Muslim Islamic sciences, they all come to the conclusion that nobody can deny that the Quran are the words that were attributed by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in that era, who claimed to be a prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to Allah, to his Lord. Everybody agrees upon this, even the people who hate Islam, even the enemies of Islam. So we don't have to talk about this subject too much, because Muslims and non-Muslims agree that these are the words attributed by the person who claimed to be a prophet at that time to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, we believe that he's a prophet and we believe these are the words of Allah. For us as Muslims, we believe in all this. But when it comes to the Sunnah, this is where Islam is being attacked. Through the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, start people shedding doubts and raising doubts about, oh, how do we know the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this? How do you know it's not a fabrication? There was fabrication in Sunnah. We tell them, in summary, the way the Quran is preserved is different from the way the Sunnah is preserved. The Quran is preserved word by word without any kind of controversy about a single letter in the Quran. We know this. The Sunnah is also preserved, but it needed more effort. Yes, there was fabrication, people fabricating, making a hadith, and sometimes they had good intentions. Somebody, for instance, sees the people not coming for salah, so he gives some kind of admonition, oh, you have to come for salah or this will happen to you. And then he sees people still not listening, so he says it, oh, Prophet ﷺ said so and so, and he claims that to bring people to salah. Of course, it's a huge sin. Yeah, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, "Man kadhaba alayya muta'ammidan falyatabawwa maq'adahu min an-nar." Whoever utters a lie and attributes it to me, he should assume his position in the fire of hell. Subhanallah. And that is why it is so important when we narrate a hadith to double check that it is an authentic hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, so we don't fall under this threat. Okay? We shouldn't take things lightly. Even on social media, a hadith comes to you, you have to verify it. Is it a true hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ? At least you have to verify. If you plan to distribute it and share it, you have to verify. You are responsible to verify this is a hadith of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ before you go ahead and send it. Now, the scholars of Islam, and this is the process of filtering and sifting through all these narrations to come to the authentic Sunnah. This was a huge process that needed the efforts of thousands of people. The number of people in the chains of narration leading to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam are more than 50,000 names. More than 50,000 people dedicated their lives to the preservation of the words of one man sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then millions of people were involved afterwards in double checking and explaining and verifying and so on. We can be 100% sure that the science of hadith is the most authentic documentation of any history humanity has witnessed. I quote to you a saying by one of the non-Muslim Orientalists who has studied the Sunnah, and he has published books in the Sunnah, and I've read some of his writings. His name is Jonathan Brown. He says that it's the science of hadith, the science that was used basically so that we come to conclusion that these are true sayings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The science of hadith, he says, is a common sense science. It is really a common sense science that you can actually verify at any point in time. You can now verify if what the Bukhari claimed to be an authentic hadith was truly authentic or not, because we have enough information to do so. We have enough information about the biography of every person out of these 50,000 people to know if they were trustworthy people or not, to know who they studied under and who studied under them, to know where they were born and when, and what countries they visited, and who are their shuyukh, and so on. All this information is available. And to know if what they narrated about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was also narrated somewhere else by other people, totally different people. Because if the same words are narrated and attributed to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ through a certain chain of narration, in Egypt for instance, and you go to Bukhara, which is past Afghanistan today, and you see the same words narrated by totally different people, leading to the same words about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and then you find the same words in Yemen, and you find the same words in Iraq, leading to the same words of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, through different chains of narration of people who never met and had no interest in lying, and actually were so afraid of lying or attributing a lie to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, you can come to a logical conclusion, if you only respect yourself and your reputation, that these are truly the words of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Imam Ahmad, for instance, when he authored his book, and Imam Ahmad lived in the second 100 year after the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he had available at his disposal, not disposal, but he actually traveled. These people used to travel sometimes. Imam Ahmad was in Iraq. He used to travel sometimes all the way to Yemen, or all the way to Mecca and Medina for one hadith. This is what their life. Imam Bukhari, he traveled for 16 years. 16 years he did not have a home. He was just traveling from place to place to place, staying in the masjid, learning from everybody who has a hadith, any saying attributed to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and verifying that this is truly a saying of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. 16 years. And for every hadith, it is mentioned that people who traveled with him, that he would wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes 12 times in the middle of the night, just to write down a word and to verify a word or correct a word. Subhanallah. In the middle of the night. And he did this. And for every hadith, before he wrote it in his book, for the longest time I used to hear that he used to make wudu and do 2 rak'at istikhara. Allah, I did my best to verify that this is a sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Oh Allah, if this is truly a sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, allow me to write it in this book. He used to do istikhara. I was told he used to do wudu and 2 rak'at. Then I come to learn after I read for myself, not only did he do wudu, he did ghusl. He did a full ghusl. A full ghusl out of respect of the hadith of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And then he would go and light the candle in the middle of the night and write down the hadith, so on. He traveled more than 18,000 kilometers. That is one man. I'm talking about one man out of 50,000 men, verifying that these are the true words that came to us from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So this man, 16 years, out of how many hadiths did he have after collecting? He collected 600,000 hadiths. 600,000 hadiths. But through filtering all these chains of narration, because if you have for one hadith different wordings from, let's say, 20 different chains of narration, if you cross-check between them, you can come to the exact wording. So how many hadiths did he extract from these 600,000 narrations? Only just over 2,500. Subhanallah. How strict was this? And how accurate was this? And how correct and precise is this? From 600,000 narrations, he comes out with 2,500. If you collect all the authentic ahadith that upon which we rely on our deen, today are only 4,500 hadiths. Probably those 4,500 hadiths, through repeated filtering and verification, they came from about 1 million different narrations. Because Imam Ahmad, who was before Imam Bukhari, when he traveled, he collected 750,000 hadith. And he managed to filter down 28,000 hadith from them. But imagine everybody researching in his own way, through his own methods, in his own locality and at his own time, coming to the same conclusion. And then they all came, and we find whatever Bukhari has narrated, the same thing as Muslim narrates, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, Ibn Hibban, Ibn Khuzaymah, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Ibn Abi Shayba, Sa'd ibn Humayd al-Tayalisi, Abu Ya'la al-Mawsili. So many people, thousands of people. Baqi ibn Makhlad, and people in Andalus, in Spain. There was a man called Baqi ibn Makhlad. Also, he had a musnad just like Muslim Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. It was probably bigger than Muslim Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So on. This is a science that nobody can doubt. Only people who want to leave religion and set themselves free from following the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would doubt the sunnah. Really, there must be some kind of ulterior motive behind those people who shed doubts about the Sunnah. Why is that? Because you cannot understand the Quran except through in the shade of the Sunnah. You cannot understand the Quran except with the details given in the Sunnah. You cannot pray, you cannot give your zakah, you cannot do your hajj, you cannot marry, you cannot do anything in this deen without the details given in the Sunnah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in tens of places in the Quran refers us to the Sunnah. You want to learn this? Go and obey the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If Allah is referring us to something that does not exist or is not verifiable or is not authentic, is Allah referring us to something that does not exist or what? If Allah is referring us to something, then Allah is referring us to something He knows will exist and will persist and will be authentic. This is basically the summary of this matter I wanted to talk about, the authenticity of the Sunnah today as a source of our deen. Inshallah, we'll continue talking about this subject some other time.